Absolutely huge week for SteelSeries this week, maybe their biggest week of the year. Not only have they just unveiled their exclusive lineup of Destiny 2 The Final Shape themed kit, but they've also released the Arctis Nova 5 wireless, giving you premium audio and affordable luxury without compromise. This just launched this week, and you can get a 12% discount when you use offer code SKILLUP over at steelseries.com. Stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Gamers, I am back from my secret overseas trip. Just briefly, I've seen a few comments suggesting that me referencing my travel is a sort of flex or humble brag. I can assure you that is definitely not the case. The problem is that Australia is at the arse end of the earth, and everything interesting in the video games industry happens in places that are between 15 and 24 hours away on a plane. That is one way, mind you. So when I shout out my travel, it's only to let you know that you should expect less content from me than usual. What is an overnight trip for my American or European friends is like a 6-day odyssey for me, not including the jet lag. So I'm just trying to keep you guys in the loop is all. Anyway, I'll be able to share the outputs of that most recent trip next week, but for now, how about we talk about some gaming news? It's earnings call season right now, and one of the most interesting sets of results was Sony's, in large part because it showcases that the PlayStation business is evolving. Case in point, their biggest success this year has been a PC release. Helldivers 2 was sold through an absolutely absurd 12 million units in 12 weeks, largely due to its success on PC. Said Sony, quote, "The game has become our biggest PC hit title to date, and as a multi-platform title, it has also contributed significantly to sales and profit last quarter," end quote. It's no secret that Sony has plans to invest further into live services, and for the PC to be a central pillar in that strategy. They provided an update on the strategy during the same earnings call, quote, "Following this success, we are looking forward to the release of live service games such as the expansion content for Destiny 2 The Final Shape, which is expected to be released by Bungie on June 4th, and Concord, which is scheduled to be released this year by Firewalk Studios, which we acquired in 2023, end quote. If you're wondering what Concord is, by the way, you are not alone. Other than a brief teaser trailer from a little while ago, we still have no idea what that is, so do expect to see more info about it at the next Sony State of Play, rumored to be dropping pretty soon. The other trend we're seeing is a shift in PS5 console sales. Sony says they've shipped 59.3 million units, with 20.8 million of those being in the last 12 months alone. That is short of projections though, as Sony had hoped to sell 25 million units, but this overall sales figure does put the PS5 performance at about the same spot that the PS4 was this far into its life cycle. However, Sony is projecting lower sales for the coming year due to fewer big game releases shifting console units. Sony says they now believe the PS5 sales have peaked and will decline year on year from here on out, which obviously would naturally lead into the release of a Pro model, but it's hard to gauge demand for that without having more insight into the upcoming PS5 exclusive software library. Right now, a PS5 Pro is a really tough sell, but if you add in 4 to 5 truly top-tier Sony exclusives that play better on that new Pro console, the conversation starts to shift a little. Do Sony have those 4 to 5 titles in the works right now though? I mean, yeah, but when they'll arrive is a complete mystery. And that is a very central challenge for Sony, and I'll tell you why. Here's a graph from a Twitter user, Pierre485, who regularly covers video game sales data. On the left is sales for Nintendo versus sales for Sony. On the right is profit. Sony's sales are 2.5 times larger than Nintendo's, but their profit is just over half of Nintendo's. The moral of the story? Making Sony games in big LA-based studios staffed by hundreds of people is expensive, and PlayStation's profit margins have shrunk to their lowest levels ever as games take more time and more money to make. And Sony is not Microsoft. They do not have an infinite money glitch in the form of Windows or Office or fucking Microsoft Teams. If PlayStation doesn't succeed, then Sony is in some serious trouble, so these cost pressures are existential for Sony in a way that they just aren't for Microsoft or Nintendo. Also of note, 77% of Sony game sales are now digital, that trend only accelerating over time as more and more retailers step back from box sales. It is very likely that this will be the last console generation where physical media is still an expectation. Xbox are already leading the way on this front, making a number of their first-party releases digital only, and given the cost saving to Sony, there's every chance that PlayStation will follow suit. Speaking of Xbox, here's a really interesting fact to spill out of this earnings call. Games industry analyst Daniel Lamart is reporting that in the last quarter, according to his data, PS5 outsold Xbox Series consoles 5-1. 5-1. I mean, if accurate, that is a staggering figure, but not at all a surprising one. This past quarter was when Microsoft revealed their plans to go multi-platform. Before this time, if someone were to ask me, hey man, should I buy an Xbox or a PlayStation? I'd be like, well, there's some pros and cons, yada yada yada. But now I just be like, nah man, get a PlayStation. You're gonna get all the Xbox games on there eventually anyway, and we could all sense that even though Microsoft are still unwilling to admit it. Gamepass is obviously a compelling value proposition, but the third-party offering is always unpredictable, and its first-party offerings pale in comparison to what Sony are putting out. So yeah, obviously the PS5 is the right call. And that is why when Microsoft gestured towards this multi-platform future, I immediately thought that it was just over for Xbox hardware. There's still going to be an Xbox, sure, in the same way that there's like a Microsoft Surface, but do you need to buy it now? No, you need to buy a Switch, a PC, and a PlayStation, and then you're covered. Xbox consoles simply don't make sense given Microsoft's new strategy. Speaking of which, Microsoft insider Jez Corden of Windows Central is reporting that which we all knew to be true. Microsoft are planning to release other first-party games on competing hardware. He says that internally, the multi-platform effort has a project name, that being Latitude, and he says, quote, "From what I've heard, Microsoft is pushing for no red line for what games could come to PlayStation, and it all revolves around Satya Nadella and CFO Amy Hood's mandate to increase every department's margins," end quote. If this reporting is accurate, then it confirms a lot of what we had assumed. Once the multi-platform door is open, you can't shut it behind you, and we did suspect that this was a push from Microsoft's top brass rather than from Xbox's leadership team, since the significance of the core brand is severely diminished when it's no longer associated with exclusive content. Interestingly, the Wall Street Journal are reporting that the next Call of Duty game will come to Game Pass, and yeah, that's very surprising to be honest. I can't see the commercial logic in it, but I'm sure the eggheads crunching the math know a lot more than I do. I could see a case for previous Call of Duty games arriving on Game Pass, sure, but to give up all that upfront COD revenue in exchange for the hope of long-term Game Pass growth, that would be a risky play, and I'd be genuinely interested to see how that one shakes out. Hey, here's something I didn't expect to be saying this week after Xbox just closed 3.5 studios, including Arcane Austin and Tango Gameworks. Microsoft are opening a new studio. For real, this is not a joke. This week, Microsoft subsidiary Activision, God, that sounds so weird, they announced that they're opening a new studio in Poland to work on, quote, "a narrative-based and genre-defining AAA franchise," end quote. The studio is called Elsewhere Entertainment, and it's comprised of vets from Naughty Dog, CD Projekt Red, Ubisoft, and more. Poland is an increasingly vibrant game dev hub, with a large pool of upcoming and veteran talent to draw from, plus Polish wages are substantially cheaper than American or Japanese wages, making that location particularly attractive to publishers looking for some of that sweet, sweet wage arbitrage. That concoction of talent and cost effectiveness was no doubt what drew Baldur's Gate 3 developer Larian Studios to Poland as well, because yes, they too, just this very week, announced that they are opening a new studio in Poland. Said Larian in a statement, quote, "Like its sister studios across the globe, Larian Studios Warsaw is dedicated to fostering an environment where developers can thrive creatively and reclaim their agency," end quote. They now put all that studio weight behind the 2 new projects they're working on, neither of which is Baldur's Gate 4. Very sad times. Some more financial news now, this time out of Ubisoft, who have had themselves a surprisingly successful year, despite the fact that they didn't really release all that much, and a lot of what they did release wasn't that successful. Net bookings rose 33.5% this year to over 2.3 billion euros. Much of that success attributed to back catalogue, as well as their perennial live service workhorse, Rainbow Six Siege. The other way that Ubisoft has increased profits is through cost cutting, though they have done it differently from other publishers. They have done some layoffs, but on a much smaller scale than we've seen across the rest of the industry. Instead, Ubisoft have been capping headcount since about 2022, and since that time, overall headcount has declined by roughly 1,700 people. This, combined with other cost-cutting initiatives, saw Ubisoft's cost base shrink by over 150 million euros in the past 12 months alone, putting Ubi on a path to their highest net bookings ever reported this year. And that was a year where their biggest release was Skull and Bones, no joke. Ubi are now looking down the barrel of a big year featuring Star Wars Outlaws and a new mainline Assassin's Creed game, so there's every chance that next year's earnings call will be a red letter day for Ubisoft shareholders. There was one casualty to emerge from this earnings call, however, and that was the Division Heartland. Remember how a few weeks ago I was like, what the fuck is going on with that game? Give us an update, Ubisoft. Well, they did, and it's not good. The game has now been cancelled. As a bit of a refresher, Heartland was basically like free-to-play survival from the Division 1, which was a battle royale extraction game before any of those words were cool. No joke, survival predated PUBG, and certainly predated Tarkov by many years. Ubisoft did not know what they had on their hands and squandered that game mode, locking it behind a DLC paywall for a premium looter shooter. Back then, I literally told Massive, I'm like, please, for the love of God, spin this out and make it free. Alas, they didn't, and Heartland was meant to be a chance for Ubisoft to get back on the trolley with this style of game. Despite being very far along in development and with a number of large-scale playtests behind it, the game now joins the ranks of Ghost Recon Frontline, competitive live service experiences cancelled 6 feet from the finish line. It is unclear what developer Redstorm are working on next, but it's likely they'll return to their status as a support studio, which is sad because this was their shot at taking the lead on something for the first time in a long time, and it didn't go their way. And finally, details are starting to leak about the next game Valve are planning to release. This info comes from a variety of sources, including Eurogamer and Tyler McVicker. They say that Valve's next game is called Deadlock, and it's a 6v6 competitive MOBA-style hero shooter with tower defense elements. It's had various names in the past, including Neon Prime and Citadel, and it's been in development since around 2018. Apparently, it's the brainchild of Dota creator IceFrog, and it's recently had a closed alpha, which is where these leaks have sprung from. Visually, it's meant to have a European steampunk vibe, not totally dissimilar to something like Half-Life 2 or Dishonored. As word has spilled out, people have been like, oh look, Valve is copying Overwatch, and Team Fortress fans are like, are you for real right now? Either way, it is pretty exciting. Not every Valve game is a banger, looking at you, Artifact, but most of them are, as Valve continues its very unique and focused approach to product and game design, moving at a pace that pleases them and them alone, allowing them to prioritize quality and polish over shareholder value, which is easy to do when you don't have any shareholders, except for Gaben. God bless him. A quick lightning round to finish off. We may not be getting a Fallout 5 anytime soon, but you know what we are getting? Fallout in Fortnite. Yay. Do you reckon it'll have all the bugs? I'm not talking about rad roaches, by the way. The details for the crossover aren't yet clear, but we can certainly expect some skins, and I'd wager a location or two based on the classic Bethesda franchise or the TV show that breathed new life back into it. That'll drop next week when Chapter 5 Season 3 launches. Speaking of Fortnite, Epic are in some hot water with the Dutch. They were fined over 1 million euros by the consumer rights regulatory body for taking advantage of kids. Thankfully, not in any sort of Catholic church way, just more about advertising to them when they shouldn't be. Quote, ACM found that children that played the game could experience pressure in several ways to make purchases, for example by using ads which directly exhort children to make purchases, and by using misleading countdown timers for items on offer, end quote. The Netherlands out here discovering cash shop FOMO for the first time, and they will not stand for it. This is the country that was among the first to enact meaningful loot box legislation for any game not rated for adults. So this is actually very on brand for them. Gotta say, really respect any government willing to take a look at this stuff and take action, since most of them just throw their hands up in confusion and end up accidentally banning TikTok. Square Enix is still trying to keep foam stars alive, though to no one's surprise, a recent Square Enix earnings call suggests that the title underperformed versus expectations. To help get things back on track, Square are halving most of the in-game spending costs, an unusual move in this space since the prices usually go the other direction. Either way, I don't see much of a future for this game unless it gets ported to PC and or Switch with full crossplay enabled. We'll see how long that PlayStation exclusive contract has left on it, I suppose. There's something weird going on over at EA when it comes to Immortals of Avium. So the game is just about to hit Xbox Game Pass and EA Play's basic tier. To celebrate, Ascendant Studios put out a blog post revealing two interesting tidbits. Number one, the game has been played by over 1.3 million people at this point, not bad. Number two, EA seems to have struck a deal with Ascendant to provide 100% of sale revenue directly to the studio, bypassing the publisher cut for the foreseeable future. That's pretty cool, and may help keep Ascendant Studios on their feet as rumors of studio closures loom. Here's what's weird though, after that blog post went out, the mention of 1.3 million players was removed, as was the mention of revenue going directly to the studio. Not sure what's up with that. We've reached out to both EA and Ascendant Studios for comment, and we'll report back if we hear anything. Are we getting a new mainline Nier game? Question mark? That's the question on every weeb's lips this week after Nier producer Yosuke Saito announced he was teaming up with Nier creator Yoko Taro and Nier composer Keiichi Okabe for a new project. Quote, I've been talking about wanting to do something with Yoko and Okabe for some time now. I'll have something a bit more put together to say in the not too distant future, so please stay tuned. It might be Nier, it might not be. Laughs, end quote. Thanks, man. That laugh really filled us with a lot of confidence. Appreciate that. The labors of Tango Gameworks are now complete, with the studio releasing their final update to Hi-Fi Rush this week. Tango released patch notes for the update, but nothing was notable in there, just minor changes and bug fixes. They also reiterated that a physical version of the game is still on the way from limited run games, and it truly is a testament to how far things have regressed when Tango need to work with a third-party provider to get physical discs into consumers' hands, instead of working with the trillion-dollar corporation that owns them and runs a major video game platform, or at least it was a major platform, who's to say at the moment. Meanwhile, Arcane is still working to ship the final update to Redfall that will bring, among other things, single-player pausing. FromSoft, take note. The man behind the XCOM revival, Jake Solomon, left Firaxis 14 months ago to start a new studio, and now we know what it is. Midsummer Studios is a new outfit with about $6 million in equity fundraising behind them. They're making a new life sim game that's looking to go head-to-head with stuff like The Sims, which is actually a pretty smart idea, since that genre definitely needs some competition. Given how new the studio is, I wouldn't expect to see a reveal for this first game anytime this year, but a 2025 reveal and maybe a 26 early access launch seems like a reasonable timeline. Amazon have revealed their upcoming slate of programming. Yes, they are doing that live-action Nick Cage Spider-Man noir series, and yes, we will all be watching On the video game front, they've greenlit a new Tomb Raider TV series, and I still cannot believe that that franchise is still getting new anything. I feel like it hasn't been relevant in over a decade. More interestingly, Amazon have also commissioned a 4-part documentary about the Madden NFL video game, and yeah, I don't even like that game, but I would still watch that. That actually sounds kind of interesting. Some sales and player count numbers for you. The Monster Hunter series just topped over 100 million unit sales, with 25 million of those being Monster Hunter World alone, a reminder of just how massively successful that release was, and how eager fans were to get a version of the game not restrained by handheld hardware. The solo-made Manor Lords has now sold through 2 million copies in less than 3 weeks, a reminder that smaller games aren't just for awards and prestige, despite what some executives may tell you. Speaking of smaller indie titles, Grand Theft Auto 5 has just passed 200 million units sold, continuing its streak as the single most profitable piece of entertainment media in the history of our species. A reminder that publisher Take-Two Interactive shuttered 2 independent game studios this past fortnight. I do expect that some of that GTA money could have gone towards keeping those studios afloat, especially Roll7, which deserved far better. Speaking of layoffs, there were more this week since it's 2024, and that's just how it goes. An unknown number of Square Enix staff were just let go after the announcement of Square's organizational and strategic realignment was announced. The roles seem to be in the area of publishing, IT, and Square's indie label called The Collective. Square did highlight that further cuts are likely in the future. Palia developer Singularity laid off roughly 40% of their staff, or 36 people this week. It comes after having already laid off 49 people back in April and an undisclosed number of people back in September of last year. Palia launched to a middling reception in March of this year, and with the scale of cutbacks here, I do worry for the future of that game and the studio managing it. The biggest set of layoffs this week was from Phoenix Labs, makers of the Monster Hunter-like Dauntless, as well as Fae Farm. 2 sources say that over 100 people were let go and that future game projects were cancelled. The studio says the reductions allow them to continue focusing on Dauntless and Fae Farm, and that's all there really is to say about that, hoping those 100 people land on their feet quickly. Finally, one last bit of news to finish. 2K Games are teasing something big at the upcoming Summer Games Fest in June. Quote, 2K plans to reveal the next iteration in one of 2K's biggest and most beloved franchises, end quote. This could be the next Bioshock game, maybe, but if I was to guess, it's probably Borderlands 4, since it feels like the right time for a reveal of that one. Will we see Randy Pitchford up on stage pulling a new game reveal out of his hat? God, I hope not. Just let someone else do the reveal and leave Randy at home, or on that movie set hanging out with Kevin Hart. He looked so happy there. Randy, that is. Kevin? Not so much. So what got announced or delayed this week? Biggest reveal of the week was Assassin's Creed Shadows, the AC in Japan that we've all been begging for since AC positions itself as a time-hopping adventure. Ghost of Tsushima did kind of come along and eat its lunch since it was effectively AC in Japan in all but name, and a damn fine rendition of it as well. To keep things fresh, Ubisoft are changing up the main characters formula. There's 2 of them this time, each one representing the different fighting styles that have come to define the AC franchise in its modern iteration. Naoe is a female shinobi who looks to deliver on that stealthy hidden blade style of combat, while the male Yasuke is meant to deliver on the samurai fantasy. Of course, Yasuke is not the sort of character you'd expect to see fronting a samurai game, given that he is African, but he's actually a real historical figure who served under daimyo Oda Nobunaga in the 16th century. He was a slave and the first black man that Nobunaga had ever seen, so Nobunaga demanded him from his owner and then employed him as a personal attendant. Yasuke is also said to have briefly fought on Nobunaga's behalf during an unsuccessful coup defense. Since then, a variety of books, movies, and TV shows have taken creative license with his depiction. Hell, Yasuke even appeared as a character in the original Neo when it released back in 2017, but this does appear to be the first time that he's been made playable in a video game. For me personally, when it comes to an AC game, I'm thinking about 3 things. Number 1, is the writing good? Because Ubisoft really struggles in this department. 2, how bad is the in-game spending? Because the previous AC games really took the piss with that stuff. And 3, will this game be another 200-hour bloatfest like Valhalla was? Because if it is, you can count me out right now. AC Shadows launches for all platforms on November 15th, and we can expect to see a lot more about it at the Ubisoft Forward showcase scheduled for June 10th. Here's a funny one. Last week, Wayfinder's developer Airship Syndicate announced that Wayfinders was entering 1.0 on June 11th after a very, very rocky early access period. But there's a twist. So the early access period kind of bombed. The game was plagued with severe server issues that saw it largely unplayable for weeks. Soon after that, publisher Digital Extremes pulled the plug, not only on Wayfinders, but on their entire publishing operation. Airship Syndicate tried to secure additional funding for the game but were unsuccessful, leading them to make an unconventional choice. They're going to make it an offline, peer-to-peer enabled game, and they're removing all of the live service elements and in-game spending. They basically rebuilt the entire loot and progression economy in line with Wayfinders being a premium game. It's a pivot I've never actually seen before, I don't think. But as they say, necessity is the mother of invention, since it was either this or basically delist the game entirely. We actually sat down with the studio boss and creative director of Wayfinders on the podcast last week. Really fascinating chat about how this all went down and what it was like trying to make these tough choices. Really recommend checking that out if you're at all interested. I'll leave a link to that below the like button. The Toys for Bob co-founders are back at it after leaving the studio some time ago when it was purchased by Activision. They're now spinning up a new venture. Their first project is a spiritual sequel to the classic space shooter that they themselves released over 30 years ago, Star Control 2. This new entry is called Free Stars, Children of Infinity. I never actually played Star Control 2, but it's meant to be very influential, hence the enthusiastic Kickstarter response. With the project now funded, the real development work begins, so don't expect to hear much more about this one for quite some time. A peripheral announcement out of Xbox, or for Xbox I should say. Microsoft already makes the adaptive controller for accessibility purposes, but now an outfit by the name of BioWave have made an all-new, very modular controller. It's basically little spheres that can click together in different configurations, plus it has this really sick design. Really nice to see this sort of stuff getting out there. That's available right now. And finally, a movie release date announcement. Mortal Kombat 2 launches on October 24th, and it will get an IMAX release. Sadly, I'm talking about the all-new Mortal Kombat 2 and not Mortal Kombat Annihilation, because believe you me, I would absolutely go and see that piece of shit movie in IMAX if I had the chance. People really like that most recent Mortal Kombat movie. Personally, I thought it was kind of just a bit watered down and boring, but then again, I unironically believe that the original Mortal Kombat movie was and still is the greatest video game adaptation of all time, and I will bicycle kick anyone who says otherwise. So what came out last week? Well, Ghost of Tsushima arrived on PC for anyone living in a country where you're actually allowed to create a PSN. Now, I actually didn't know that this one was Nix's software, which is why I was wondering what shape it would be in when it arrived, but upon learning it was Nix's, I was like, well, that's all you had to say. Sure enough, the game has launched 88% very positive on Steam, with people extremely impressed at performance, optimization, and even Steam Deck performance, which is a bit of a marvel given how great this game looks. Perhaps a bigger news story is just how popular it's been, eclipsing God of War to become Sony's most successful single-player launch on PC, with a peak concurrent player count of over 77,000 people. A great result for a great game and a great port. High fives and firm handshakes all round for Sony, except for the fact that they can't sell the game in nearly 200 countries and territories. Imagine what those numbers would have been like had Sony got their shit together. I guess we'll never know. We've been keeping one laser eye laser focused on Lorelei and the Laser Eyes ever since Sam Barlow put it on our radar. The game launched last week and the reviews are in. Barlow was not lying when he called it a Game of the Year contender. It's currently sitting at 97% very positive on Steam and a mighty 87 on OpenCritic. Critics across the board are gushing, like GameSpot, who scored it a 9 out of 10, saying, quote, Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is a massive achievement in using games as a medium and an art form to tell a story that can only be experienced in a video game. It can often feel like a harrowing maze built on riddles and deception, but through perseverance, you can find your way to the center of this labyrinth and a truth worth knowing, end quote. Our man Edmond also reviewed it. The write-up for that one is over on the Patreon, freely available to all. He loved it, going so far as to call it the best thing he's played this year. He put 30 hours into it before rolling credits, and now he just wishes that the memory of it could be expunged so he could go back and experience it all over again. It's a game where you actually have to use an IRL notebook, and Edmond says he took over 40 pages of notes, his scrawlings resembling that of a madman. It just sounds like a really, really special experience, one that I definitely plan to circle back to when the madness of June subsides. But if you'd like to check it out for yourself right now, then it's available on PC and Switch. Like I said, if you do want to read the full review write-up from Edmond, I'll leave a link to that below the like button. Mullet Mad Jack looked like a bit of a laugh and a spot of good fun, but it turns out it's actually also a very good video game. This is sitting at 98% overwhelmingly positive with over 1,500 reviews counted. It's an absolutely phenomenal result. Critics are also all about it, putting it at a mighty 87 on OpenCritic. Press Start scored it an 8.5, saying, quote, Mullet Mad Jack is a blistering, balls-to-the-wall throwback to 90s anime and violent, dystopian sci-fi that marries boomer shooters with speedrunning and roguelike aspirations to form an absolutely intoxicating brew, end quote. The one is available exclusive to PC right now. Another PC exclusive is Dread Delusion, the Morrowind-esque first-person RPG I profiled a few weeks ago in the Put This On Your Radar segment. Still awaiting user scores to roll in as the launch is fresh, but some critics did get their hands on it ahead of the 1.0 launch, and they liked it, but it is some distance from the works that inspired it. PC Gamer scored it a 73, saying, quote, reverberating with a melancholy vibe, populated with memorable multi-layered characters, and rife with intrigue, Dread Delusion remains one of the most fascinating open-world settings I have visited in a while, even if, much like the unwieldy airship, it has trouble sticking the landing, end quote. I guess you could say the same thing about Morrowind actually, so maybe this is totally nailing the source material. Paper Trail is that delightful looking indie title where you have to fold paper to create new pathways. Still waiting on user scores for this one to come in, but critics love it, putting it at an 85 on OpenCritic. The gamer had a nice write-up, scoring at 4 out of 5 and saying, quote, Paper Trail is a beautifully crafted adventure that utilizes origami techniques to create a unique puzzle game with cozy vibes, stunning illustrations, and a captivating storyline. It had my attention from the first fold to the final destination, and the journey was beautiful, end quote. Biggest release of the week was Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, and this one has proven to be a hell of a lot more divisive than the last. In aggregate though, it's definitely a good news story. It's sitting at a mighty 82 on OpenCritic, which is roughly the same score the first game got. That is a great result, no doubt about that. What's interesting though is how many outlier review scores are in the mix. There are plenty of 9s or perfect scores like Eurogamers, who scored it 5 stars and said, quote, Hellblade 2 continues Senua's story with grace, confidence, prizing brutality, and thunder and conviction, end quote. Or GamesRadar, who also scored it a perfect 5 and said, quote, a masterclass in technical and thematic maturity, end quote. But then you've got outlets like PC Gamer, who scored it a 58 and said, quote, despite its greater scale and visual splendor, this sequel fails to escape the shadow of its predecessor with a muddled tale that Senua herself feels out of place in, end quote. Or GameSpot, who scored it a 6, saying, quote, Hellblade 2 is perhaps the most visually remarkable Xbox title to date, but is ultimately undermined by its emphasis on fidelity over story and gameplay, end quote. Regardless, the net result is a positive one for Ninja Theory, and it seems to be enough to keep the wind in their sails, as Jez Corden of Windows Central is reporting that the studio's next game has already been greenlit, meaning that contrary to recent chatter and concerns, the studio will live to fight another day. Only other drop last week was for X Defiant, but given that it dropped yesterday, free to play for PC, Xbox, and PlayStation, we'll check back in on the reviews next week. So what's coming out this week? Well, a collection of smaller titles this week actually, and kicking things off is Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. Sure, it was big back in the day, but it's a little more niche now in its re-released and remastered form. The work Nintendo's done to it is looking wonderful, and best of all, it'll be playable on Switch, meaning you'll no longer need to pay $400 for a GameCube copy on eBay, because as we all know, buying old copies of Nintendo games is the only way to play them. At least that is what I am reliably informed by Nintendo's lawyers. Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door drops tomorrow for the Switch. Wizardry: Proving Grounds of the Mad Overlord has been in early access since September of last year, and now it's about to hit 1.0. Tomorrow it'll be available exclusively for PC. It's a full remaking of the original Wizardry 1, built on top of the original code, meaning you can switch between the graphics on the fly, which is always a nice trick whenever retro remasters let you do that. Duck Detective: The Secret Salami is obviously taking itself pretty seriously. It's a detective game where you play as a cute duck and you need to solve a mystery. It's inspired by The Return of the Obra Dinn and The Case of the Golden Idol. Stu and Edmond both played this during the recent Steam Next Fest and they loved it. It's arriving exclusive to PC tomorrow. Arcade GK is an exceptionally stylish, Jet Set Radio inspired action game with a focus on movement, color, and graffiti, hence the Jet Set Radio comparisons. This one was revealed only a short time ago, and now this week it's arriving exclusive to PC. It's being published by Gearbox actually, so he's hoping it gets a console release as well in the future. This one's actually looking really nice. 33 Immortals is one I remember seeing a while back. It's a top-down roguelike with a twist. The twist being that you can play alongside up to 32 other players. Not sure how that would work actually. I suspect it would end up being a bit of a clusterfuck. But if you're interested to check it out for yourself, this one's launching for PC and Xbox on the 24th. Personally, the release I'm most excited for this week is the Rogue Prince of Persia, which launches exclusive to PC on the 27th since it's an early access launch. Other platforms will follow after that. It's the second Prince of Persia game we're getting inside of 5 months after going like 10 years of getting none. The most recent Lost Crown was a Metroidvania, but this is actually a roguelike, hence the title, and it's made by Evil Empire, the studio who are handling the long-tail support for Dead Cells, while Motion Twin worked on their next thing. Great studio to have on a release like this, really like the art style and the coloring on display, and personally, I'm always just a big fan of big publishers directing their resources to smaller bets like this. Really looking forward to checking this one out. Smash Brothers Perverts, this one's for you, maybe, question mark. Multiverses has had a very, very long road to release, but it's finally here. The roster of characters is massive, the voice talent behind the cast is generally top tier, and the developers have clearly put a lot of work into balancing this thing based on multiple rounds of feedback. The only risk now is that this is a Warner Brothers video game, and if there's one thing that Warner Brothers excels at, it's ruining fighting games with egregious monetization. At least that's what Mortal Kombat fans tell me. This one's going to be free to play, so it's a pretty low barrier to entry. It arrives for all platforms bar the Switch on the 28th. Nine Souls comes from Taiwan-based Red Candle Games. It's a very accomplished 2D platformer, and I know because I played a preview build a while back and loved it. They also had a demo during a recent Next Fest which got a great reception. This one's arriving on the 29th of May exclusive to PC. And finally, Aussie-based Spitfire Interactive are taking another stab at the whole XCOM with superheroes thing, but without all of that dreadful life sim stuff that Midnight Suns had. Man, I will never ever forget the memory of the book club, and neither should you. Capes is that more traditional turn-based, tile-based tactical strategy game that XCOM fans are used to, except instead of guns and ammo, it's superpowers. Really leaning into the comic book art style and presentation as well, hoping this launches strongly. We'll find out when it arrives on the 29th, exclusive to PC. Alright, it's that time again, so put this on your radar. We keep hearing that the immersive sim is dead, and that's only half true. Sure, big publishers don't like making them, but the indie scene is more than willing to pick up the slack. Enter Retro Space, an immersive sim action shooter from developer The Wild Gentleman. It's obviously got that Half-Life or System Shock 2 aesthetic going on, but the retro in the title refers more to the fact that the setting for the game is 1970s sci-fi, or at least that's one of the settings, since apparently the ship you're on keeps moving between two different time periods unexpectedly. It's clearly doing some interesting things with visuals, light, shadow, and stealth, but personally, I'm most drawn to the idea of another immersive sim in space, especially in light of the recent closure of Arcane Austin. If you'd like to help keep the IM sim alive, then consider wishlisting this one. I've left a link to it over on my Steam Curator page, which also has links to all of the other put this on your radar stuff I've recently covered. I'll leave a link to all of that below the like button. Sort of free stuff time now, and man, this is one of those absolute bangers of a week, so hold on to your butts. Kicking things off is Epic. Last week they kept their next giveaway under wraps, and that's usually a good sign. Sure enough, right now you can grab Dragon Age Inquisition Game of the Year Edition. Very well timed, given that everyone is hoping to see Dragon Age Dreadwolf at the Summer Games Fest showcase in June. Be quick though, because this one will disappear on May 24th, which is like 2 days after this video goes live. After that, we don't know what's next, another mystery offering, which as I said before, is always cause for excitement. The PS Plus Extra and Premium tiers also got their refresh. Main shoutouts include Red Dead Redemption 2 and that's about it, not too much on there to be honest. Gamepass though is a whole other story. Chance of Sonar is a truly unmissable language-based detective style game where you have to translate a language to solve puzzles. Really fantastic game. Immortals of Avium, we spoke about this one earlier, and yep, it is now on Game Pass. It's perfect Game Pass fodder to be honest. Just silly MCU-esque storytelling and relentless pew-pewing. At this price point, I think you will be pleasantly surprised by it, I really do. Biggest drop this week is of course Hellblade 2, and given the short runtime on that one, I do expect that Game Pass will be the most popular entry point for Hellblade. Moving Out 2 is good, clean co-op fun if you've got someone to play with. Humanity is an excellent modern spin on Lemmings that didn't get nearly enough attention when it launched. And the biggest surprise addition is the recently released Lords of the Fallen. So, not a fantastic Souls-like, our review for that one is below the like button, but it does have some redeeming aspects like its dual world structure, and the visuals are absolutely out of this world. Easily the best looking Souls-like ever made, at least from a technical perspective. Given the rough edges on this one, a full price purchase is a bit of a risky bet, but on Game Pass, that is an absolute steal. Alrighty, we are running a little long, so we're going to make this week's feel-good story quick. I don't post on Twitter anymore, but I do doom scroll to keep up with the news, and yesterday, as I was scrolling, I came upon a statement posted to the official Angry Birds Twitter handle. It read thusly, quote, "We sincerely apologize for an unfortunate incident that occurred on our account. Recently, an inappropriate post was accidentally reposted from the account. This was a genuine mistake, and we deeply regret any harm it may have caused," end quote. Oh, okay, sounds serious. I wonder what it could have been. Intrigued, I journeyed into the replies, and after wading through all of the completely unrelated replies, the OnlyFans honey traps, and the porn bots, I eventually found the original offending tweet retweeted by the official Angry Birds Twitter handle. It reads as follows, quote, "Angry Birds. I used to jerk off to Angry Birds. When I was about 13, I loved Angry Birds. I had every game and bought every toy they had. One day, I was playing Angry Birds when all of a sudden, the big red bird turned me on. I couldn't stand it. I was going crazy. I decided to pull," end quote. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why it is still worth opening Twitter every now and then, no matter how bad it's gotten, because no other website can deliver moments quite like these. Alright nerds, time to love you and leave you, but a few housekeeping things first. If you were in Australia or New Zealand, then this is your last week to be in the running for that custom-built shill-up PC, courtesy of our friends over at Gigabyte Aorus. There's a link to enter below. Best of luck to you all, even our Kiwi brothers. You guys are alright, sometimes. Everybody else, stay tuned for some content later this week. Austin's review of Hades 2 is done, so expect that up soon. I'm working on something related to my recent trip, very excited to get that out to you next week, while Edmond is plugging away at Paper Mario, and we'll have an impressions write-up on the Patreon after embargo. So yeah, lots going on, and we really appreciate all of your support, just like we appreciate you dropping a like on the video, hitting the subscribe button, and dinging that notification bell. Thanks again for stopping by, and be sure to stick around to hear from this week's sponsor, SteelSeries, since they just launched some really nice stuff. I think you're gonna like it. Okay, so like I said at the top of the video, huge week for SteelSeries. They've just unveiled their very limited edition Destiny 2 The Final Shape themed kit, featuring a very snazzy mouse mat, artisan keycap, and a booster pack for select Arctis Nova headsets, allowing you to add a little flair up there. Absolutely love all of this stuff, and it's on sale right now over at steelseries.com, and you do get that 12% off when you use offer code SKILLUP. These are extremely limited and they always sell out lightning fast, so if you do want to grab them, don't delay. The bigger news this week though was SteelSeries dropping an all-new product into their award-winning lineup of gaming headsets. This latest offering is called the Arctis Nova 5 Wireless, and it is specifically designed to be the best value entry point into the premium gaming headset category, offering all new cutting-edge features that many other significantly more expensive headsets don't offer. SteelSeries are really looking to shake things up with this release. What remains the same is SteelSeries' commitment to award-winning audio quality. The Arctis Nova 5 Wireless features neodymium magnetic drivers, allowing you to hear everything with an ultra-detailed soundscape of crystal clear highs, pinpoint mids, and deep bass. Same goes for the microphone. The Clearcast 2.x mic features a new high bandwidth chipset supporting 32kHz 16-bit audio to keep your comms crystal clean and clear. Plus you can supercharge that even further with Sonar AI-powered noise cancellation on PC for the ultimate two-way noise reduction on comms. The unique design also seamlessly blends the mic into the ear cup when they're fully retracted, so it looks really nice and clean on the go. The biggest addition to this new model is the companion app. What this does is it allows you to instantly switch between over 100 game-specific audio presets that have been precisely tuned by SteelSeries and their partners to give you the best possible soundscape for the games that you're playing. Games focused on relentless action may require a more neutral soundscape, but if you're playing something competitive where you need to hear the sounds of footsteps, distant weapon fire, or a grenade bouncing, then these presets are tuned to bring that sound to the forefront. A true competitive advantage in whatever you're playing, accessible at any time with just the press of a button on your smartphone. Outside of that, the Nova 5 Wireless has a staggering 60 hours of battery life while also supporting USB-C fast charging. It works with basically anything with a USB-C port, including PS5, Xbox Series consoles, the Switch, the MetaQuest 3 headset, and even USB-C smartphones. It also supports Bluetooth, and with just the press of a button, you can go from your console or PC audio to Bluetooth smartphone audio, allowing you to take calls uninterrupted. Best of all, the Arctis Nova 5 Wireless manages to deliver all of this at a price point that makes it extremely competitive in the premium headset category. This is a fantastic entry point, giving you next-gen features that many more expensive headsets just don't offer. But if you're still not convinced, then don't forget you can get a further 12% off that price point when you use offer code SKILLUP over at steelseries.com. That works for the Destiny kit, for the new Arctis Nova 5 Wireless, and for anything else on the steelseries.com site. That's offer code SKILLUP at checkout. Thanks SteelSeries for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.